Okay, so thank you for being here. My presentation today will be about, as the title suggests, about leader skills that can actually be applied by anyone. The presentation is extracted from this book, which is called, The Leader Lab. That's an interesting book that our client asked us to get and read. We are actually having some kind of book club every 2 weeks where we discuss new chapters that we read of the book itself. And the book is made from two researchers which are involved in training managers and related literature. And the book includes many foundational skills that are essential to become great managers as fast as possible. But as I said before, some of these skills actually apply, in my opinion, and also to our clients' opinion, of course, to all of us, especially in a context like ours, where we are doing some kind of creative work and we have to collaborate with each other in solving problems. So, if you're interested in the book, basically it talks about these skills that they observed by watching closely some thousands of managers when they operate, and also these skills are extracted from the direct experience they had in training thousands of managers from companies all around the world. So they were able to observe and extract behavioral patterns that distinguish the great managers from the perceived average ones. And they divided these skills into two main categories, which are behavioral units and core skills. Briefly, these categories are the following. Behavioral units are basically micro behaviors, something you can do in a conversation with a coworker or with someone you're managing, are a series of micro behaviors that can also be combined and reused in many different situations. As the book describes, they are the foundational core to become great managers, but not also. And also, if you're interested, the book has core skills in the second part of the book, which are specifically dedicated to leadership, like one-on-ones, meeting handlings in general, etc. And these are way more complex and need way more practice alone to be accomplished. But today, as I said, we are going to focus on the behavioral parts, behavioral units part of the book. So the behavioral units specified in the book are these 7. We are going to talk about each one of them. According to the authors, there are actually many more, but these 7 are really the most important to have for everyone and the starting point for this journey. So first one is Q-step. What is Q-step? It's easily defined in the book as the practice of asking questions before offering solutions, which can be easy to imagine maybe in a managed relationship, but also if a coworker comes to you and tries to describe a problem. It also is interesting to consider that managers often go immediately into telling mode before question mode. So basically, instead of trying to ask questions to better understand the underlying problem, they may be tempted to start talking about a possible solution immediately. And that also happens. One of the main reasons for it is that most managers, especially in our field, as you can imagine, become managers after being people that actually produce more work instead of managing other people producing work. So we are maybe more trained to solve problems instead of asking questions. Also, according to many studies, great managers in general ask 5 times more questions than managers that are perceived as average from their employees. And of course, here we are only talking about the habit of asking questions. We are not specifically focusing yet on the questions quality, but it of course matters, because if you have to give feedback to a coworker, how can you be so bad at this, is a question, but it's not a question you should really use, for example, right? And we'll see more about question content later on. Let's see a couple of examples of the Q step. Let's say that someone comes to you and suggests an idea that you know hasn't worked in the past. If you go into telling mode, you may be tempted to say, hey, we already tried that idea and it hasn't worked in the past. But if you try to go into Q step mode, you may just start asking, okay, but what other options have you considered and how did you decide on this one? As you can see, the second approach may make you feel like you're spending a bit more time than necessary, but actually it helps you uncovering underlying details, and it may make you find out that the conditions that this solution is being applied to are different than the ones you remember from the past, or maybe something else has changed, and it's worth reevaluating the plan. Or for example, let's say that a coworker tells you that a team member is just hard to work with. If you have the same experience, you could start in telling mode saying that you noticed the same thing and the coworker did X, Y, and Z. But if you try to go into Q-step mode first, you could ask, for example, okay, but what makes you say that? And would you mind maybe sharing an example of a situation where you found it hard to work with that coworker? So you may find out that actually you are having the same experience as the coworker you're talking to, or maybe even a different experience, or maybe the coworker experience is not as bad as they think. There might be some bias involved. So the main benefits of the Q step are the following. As we have seen from the examples, it helps diagnosing underlying problems faster, because more questions lead to more details being uncovered, which also leads to a better understanding of the underlying issues for every part involved. It also has a great benefit of improving people problem-solving skills in general, because as soon as you ask questions, you make the other people think through more about their problem and maybe uncover some details themselves without you actually asking for them, or actually asking for every possible detail instead of them. And this creates a mentality of problem solving that they may be able to reuse in the future in a more easy way. And also it does encourage ownership and autonomy, especially for managers, because the more you ask questions instead of just telling people what to do, the more satisfied people will actually feel when they come up with a solution, because it will actually feel way more like it's their own, instead of what will happen if you just told them what to do. Okay, this was the Q step. I'll be honest, I'm not sure how to make it with questions, so I guess I will stop maybe after 3 or 4 behavioral units and at the end. But if there's any other question, please feel free to stop me. Otherwise, I'll go on with the next behavioral unit, which is called Playback. And we could define playback as the habit of repeating and or summarizing what you just heard someone say with your own words. So maybe after a coworker comes to you and explains you a problem or a possible solution that they want to apply, a first good step may be a playback, where you play back what you heard with your own words, which helps you identifying the key points to discuss before actually start the discussion. And as we'll see, this could make you feel like it makes the conversation longer, because you can actually use it multiple times during a conversation to always make sure you have understood what we are talking about. But it actually makes the conversation way more efficient and may be able to save a lot of work on the long run. For example, that's something we have been doing in our team in Framework, and I found myself using this strategy, and it it was very useful after the morning stand-up to avoid misunderstandings and avoid reworking, for example. But let's see some clearer examples to have a better idea. Let's say that a coworker comes to you and says, okay, we might need to refactor part of the backend, but we should be okay to release the feature on time. And the sentence may not be 100% clear, so you may ask, okay, are you saying the release is on track even if we refactor, or do we need to decide between refactoring and meeting the deadline? Which, as you can see, is a very big difference to keep in mind before starting any work. Or let's say that a coworker tells you, hey, the API should handle the new data format, but we might need some adjustments depending on how the front end integrates it. And also here we have some room for misunderstanding. So you may ask, are you saying that the API is fully compatible now, or do we need to wait for front-end integration to confirm if changes are required? Which is also a pretty important information to avoid rework and misunderstanding. There are different types of playback depending on what aspect you want to focus on. There's the simple content playback, for example, where you just try to play back all the info you have heard. Like, it sounds like your problem is that the class is not readable. Is it correct? And there are also many other types of playback that you can strategically use depending on what you want to achieve. For example, the split track is something we just used, which is playing back the separate issues when the speaker points out more than one. So you make sure that you got all of them. And then you can also discuss about which issue to treat before. In some cases, it also simple feelings playback may be very helpful because maybe someone is describing a problem, is very stressed about it, like some pull request to finish before a deadline, preparing a presentation, etc. So you may catch their feeling and ask confirmation about how they're feeling about this project or this problem, which can be very helpful. Or also sometimes just using a so-called needs playback, where you just try to catch and underlie what the need of the speaker is. Like if you notice, you can point out if you notice that they seem to need more, let's say, recognition or reassurance or just help about solving a specific issue, which may put them in a better position to be able to fix their own problem they're working on. Or you can just do a playback pool, which is asking someone else to play back what you said to make sure that you have explained yourself correctly and to make sure that you and the person you're speaking to are actually on the same page. So it's very helpful after maybe you're not sure if you have been clear enough, or if you want to make sure that every detail of your problem has been understood. Some benefits of the playback are the following. First, as we said, it helps catching misunderstanding earlier. If you repeat what you have just understood, then you have an agreement, you find an agreement or not on your version with the other person, and you make sure that you understood it correctly, or give them the chance to repeat it. Also, the playback in general creates clarity faster, because even the simple fact of describing issues out loud makes your mind activate in a better way and think about the problems more, like the plain old duck programming that we all know. And also it may help other people because rephrasing their own issue helps them sometimes clear their mind about it, because it's not to take for granted that when a person has some issue to some problem to fix, some feature to develop, that it's not for granted that they have all the details clear. So have a different perspective may have them think about that in a different way. And also another interesting benefit is that the playback in general builds trust, because in general, as people, when we feel understood, we are more keen to share our feelings and thoughts more easily, and sharing these kind of things more easily leads to a better and more productive work environment in general. So let's go to the third behavioral unit, which is called the blur. The blur is the act of detecting in advance the usage of ambiguous words that you may be using in a conversation, and try your best to replace them with straightforward ones to remove any room for misunderstandings. Let's say, for example, that you give another person some feedback about some work they did. If you just say it was good or bad work, that good or bad, it's easy. That's the worst example we can ever make about the blurring, but good or bad is actually not really useful and can be interpreted in different ways. I mean, what is good, for example? Was it great? Was it just good enough, etc.? And for this behavioral unit, you should consider some things like the fact that our brains are actually wired to fill gaps with snap interpretations, and these interpretations might be wrong. So the less room we leave for misunderstanding, the better it is. And also the blurring, which means removing the ambiguous words from a communication, is also another great tool to remove uncertainty in communication. The simplest example we could do is, for example, what does X mean to you when X, for example, if I receive a feedback like this presentation is good, I could ask, okay, but what does good mean to you? Let's see an interesting example directly from the book. We can review briefly this example feedback after a candidate interview. And the feedback goes like this. I don't recommend hiring this candidate. She was closed off and standoffish the entire time. The candidates interviewed were much warmer. I wouldn't even suggest inviting her to the next interview round. The other candidates were also much more qualified. So, quick question for you. How many blurry words or expressions can you find here? Maybe just give it a look, about 20 seconds, so I have an excuse to drink water. If we move on, you can find that there are way more blurry expressions, unfortunately, here. Warmer is definitely one of them, but there are many more that are actually pretty blurry if you consider that we are describing a candidate for a job. Like, what exactly does it mean that they are closed off, that they are standoffish? What does it mean that they did it the entire time, for example? Is there a minute where they didn't do it? And also, how were the other candidates more qualified? For example, the specific word warm, which is probably the worst blurry, the most blurred expression here, that expression can mean something completely different to different people, according to studies. Like a warm person can be someone that smiles and says complimentary things to the one you're saying, or someone that listens closely and makes sure to ask questions, or maybe it's just someone who helped you, who knows. So it's tough expressions to use and not so useful. For example, some sample questions that help you deblur when you have doubts because of blurry expressions in something you said are, for example, what does war mean to you? Can you share an example of how that you consider that candidate less qualified than the others? Or what's your definition of standoffish, for example? And also, if you have something to measure, you could ask, okay, but how will we measure that phenomenon you're describing, and how will we know that we have succeeded? Are also good examples when the blurry expressions are applied to processes. So the main benefits about the blurring is that it prevents miscommunication, and also Playback does it, but this does it in advance. If you can avoid using blurry expressions, you're making a great step in advance towards that direction. It also The blurring improves feedback. It not only improves feedback, but it's the only thing that makes it actionable. As I said before, if you say, okay, this piece of code is good or it's bad, then the feedback is blurry and it can only affect feelings of the other person, but cannot give them any tool to recognize what they can improve or what they have done well and should do in the same way the next time. And also, from the candidate example, you can see that the blurring can improve a lot decision making, and it can take biases away, biases that you may not know that you have. For example, even if a person appears colder, where cold is obviously a kind of blurry expression. If a person appears colder than what we are used to be, it probably doesn't mean too much about their capability of working in a team. And it doesn't, if they're cold, it's not taken for granted that they are less capable to work in a team than a warm person, for example. So I can go on with the fourth behavioral unit, which is validate. Validate is the act of acknowledging and validating other people's perspective to make sure you're recognizing both their feelings and their viewpoints when they are trying to contribute or propose new ideas. Um, there are a couple of things to consider about this. First, that we are all humans, and since we are not machines, being validated can put us more easily in a position where we are more keen to share our thoughts, and with our thoughts in an environment where we share thoughts more easily, we are going to be more efficient for sure. And also, validation does not necessarily mean agreement. You can validate and recognize the idea and the point of view that a coworker had about how to solve a problem, but it does not necessarily mean that you agree about that. Um, you should consider a couple of things. When we talk to someone, that person and also we are gonna interpret the information we receive in two different ways. First, okay, what does the actual message that I'm receiving or that I'm giving mean? And also, how does the other person feel about me? Do they care about what I'm saying, for example? And you should consider that we are always communicating both types of information through verbal and non-verbal language, whether we want it or not. So it's actually a matter of improving how we communicate this information and not start communicating it at all. Uh, for example, if a person described some problem that they are having at work, the message could just say, okay, do you understand what happened? Do you have all the information you need? And am I making myself clear? But actually, in the way they are going to talk about that, there are going to be some implicit questions like, okay, do you see me? Do you want to hear from me? Do you respect me? Do you care about me and what I want? Which are also very important questions where you want to try to answer in a proper way. Of course, honest way, but in a proper way. You don't want to be misunderstood about that. Let's say for some examples for simplicity, like if a person comes to you and says, I'm nervous about the presentation. By the way, all these presentation examples were in the book. They are not mine. Even just starting your reply with, yeah, I get that it's a lot of pressure, and then you start discussing about why it can be a lot of pressure, and then offering help can be pretty helpful and put the person way more at ease. Or, for example, if you come out of a meeting and there's a coworker that tells you that it seems like my opinion doesn't count, you could start right away asking them what's their opinion. But if you try to recognize that why they may feel that way, for example, and say, I can see why it feels that way, but your opinion actually matters to me, it will put them in a position where they would be more willing to share their opinions if they have some particular one that they were not able to express in the meeting. Or even a simple if someone comes to you and says, I hate to admit it, but I think I made a mistake. even just recognizing it and saying thank you for telling me to recognize the fact that it's hard to admit something like that makes the following conversation easier and discuss how to fix the mistake. Some benefits of the validation are the following. First is it reduces stress faster because chronic stress in general reduces productivity and creativity, since we are not made to stand chronic stress, and in general it puts people at ease better. It's important for stress because some work environments may have many different sources of stress, and this is a great way to actually reduce stress in many different chances during the workday. And also the validation helps building trust within the team and has different effects in cascade, because when we believe that someone wants what's best for us, we are gonna trust them more. And in a high trust team, there's a better communication, and a better communication always leads to a higher performing team. And also feedback in general is taken way more seriously from people we trust, because we feel like they want what's best for us and they are giving that feedback just for us. So we are gonna act on that feedback more willingly. So it's basically a cascade of very positive effects. A final thought that I already anticipated before. No, actually, yeah, sorry. Something I anticipated before is that validation, differently from other behavioral units, it's not something we can do or can avoid doing. We are already doing it all the time, all of us. So it's mostly a matter of doing it in a better way. Of course, in an honest way, but a better way. Also, consider that, yeah, at first, if you start doing that, it can seem inauthentic and forced. But since we are already doing it, we probably better do it in a good way that creates a better work environment. Okay, we can go on with the fifth behavioral unit, which is link up. Link up, it's the simple act of trying to connect an action to its goal, especially when you're discussing an action, maybe some project, some change you want to do, and the connection to its end goal is not very clear. It's something that we can do ourselves or ask the speaker to do it with specific questions. For example, if you are talking about some refactoring you want to do, you can motivate it, saying how it will improve the code base, or if a manager comes up to you and says that they want to develop a specific feature, but you don't know really why they want that feature, you could ask more questions about it. And it's often about asking questions, but not questions as simple as why, because that one triggers defensiveness, and it's not really useful for applying this kind of behavioral unit. But let's see some examples. Let's say that another developer says, I found an affordable designer who can start improving our landing page. We could start on that on Monday. This developer may be really hyped about the opportunity to improve a lot the landing page, but you probably need to know before investing money on that why you should do that. So you could ask, okay, but just to make sure we are aligned, what's your reasoning for prioritizing the website UI right now? And for example, these may have two different outcomes. It may make developer admit that they were pretty hyped about the opportunity, but it's not super useful and should not be a priority right now. Or you may get an answer about how they found out that conversion rates are pretty low and how it might be related to the current on-page UI, for example. Or let's say that someone says, I'd like to invite a few clients to join our planning committee. And if you're not sure about what's the reason behind that, you could just ask, okay, but what do you hope to achieve that way? Which is a good question to ask before trying to involve clients and making them spend time. Or if you're trying to justify some refactoring, some work that you want to do, and maybe you're trying to spend more time on before finishing your feature, you could just say that I'd like to refactor the payment service class because this will improve its maintainability and this is the development of the new feature we need. If you go to the project manager and just say that you want to refactor the payment service class, then you're definitely in a worse position to do that than if you try to explain how it can be helpful in the near or in the near future or on the long term. If you want to use these behavioral units, there are some example of different types here, which are the following. Basically, you can just do a framing link up to try to frame something and understand the general reason, like saying, okay, the reason I'm asking this is, or can you help me understanding your reasoning behind this choice, for example? And there are also other types that can all be used both in the form of question or during your speech, even if nobody asked you to do that. Like, for example, the impact link up, where you try to understand or specify what's the impact of a decision that you have made, or the benefit link up, where you try to focus on what will some decision allow you to achieve or allow the project to achieve, or the outcome link up, like, for example, specifying what then the result you expect to be after some action, or even just a passion link up, so-called, like specifying why you are particularly excited about developing a feature, for example, or an overall link up, which is something way more generic that can lead to many other explanations, like this links up to that other feature, and etc., etc. Some benefits of the link up are the following. First, it creates alignment faster, because if people know why something is being worked on, and they are going to progress towards the same goal, and it makes the work in general easier for everyone. It has the great power of enabling autonomy on the work, because not only people will know what's the shared goal, but if they know the why of some tasks that they are trying to complete, they will be able to make decisions on their own, because knowing the main purpose, they are gonna go in that direction without needing to rely on a manager for each single decision, which will lead them to be micromanaged, and it's not really a good practice. And it also has the great benefit of actually increase people's commitment, because in general, knowing why we are doing something makes us feel way more involved and engaged in any project, which also leads to a better productivity itself. Okay, we have a couple more behavioral units, which are a bit simpler than the others. First one is pause, and it's very overlooked as a behavioral unit, and it's just the act of taking intentional pauses, like before responding or taking a decision. It's way too overlooked because it does not really come natural to us, but if you think about it and you see literature, our brains are not really wired to work for 8 hours uninterrupted 7 days a week. You may have noticed that. They are actually wired to work in bursts, which are restricted periods of time with some breaks in between. That's how they give their best, actually. There are a few types of poses that we should consider, like, for example, micro poses that last from a few seconds to a few minutes, like a pause to cue step and think of a question to clarify a matter before moving on to a discussion, or a pause to link up before starting a new task to make sure you are aligned on what the end goal is, or even a pause to just breathe before responding to someone where you feel hurt or angry, to make sure you are going to give a way better and more productive answer. We also have mesopauses, which last more, like 1 or more hours, which are essential to our brain, like pausing to exercise, to reflect on the goals of your week, or even just to move away from a challenge when stuck, which is something that could be is something that is really helpful at times to get unstuck on problems. And we also have macro pauses, like pauses that last several days to do long-term planning, like for a company, or pauses to unplug after work and make sure we come back to work recharged after a weekend or an holiday, or even just a pause for a full day to extract some learnings from the past year, for example. Pauses, despite being overlooked, they also have benefits themselves, like they allow to create sustainable productivity, since the brain cannot be 100% on 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are essential to actually reduce stress, prevent chronic stress, which in turns maintains productivity higher over the long term. They actually spark innovation. They allow you to have those famous shower aha moments, like, for example, when you thought hard about a problem, how to solve it, and maybe you just realize it when you're working and when you're walking on your lunch break, or when you're taking a shower, for example. And these, they don't just come after doing nothing, but they actually come from intense focus followed by some pause. These can often make great ideas pop up in random moments of your days, but without pauses, these could just never happen. And also, when there's some conflict with another person, the pauses can resolve or prevent conflicts in a much better way. Because in terms of conflict, if there are some bad feelings involved, your responses may be way less productive than you want them to be. So taking a pause may allow you to cool down and be way more focused on the problem at hand before responding. And the last but not least behavioral unit is extract, which is also something simpler than the other behavioral units, and something we probably all already do, but it's still nice to recognize it and uh, give it some recognition that we are already doing it regularly, or we should do it regularly, and it's very helpful. Which is basically extracting is pausing to reflect on past experiences to try to earn reusable information from them. Uh, you should consider something that is often overlooked, that learning new information does not only happen when we found out some new information, like reading a book and try to apply it, but it also can happen when we reflect on our past experiences, because maybe we faced a project, or we have seen some candidate interview, or we did that interview, but there may be some missing information there that only comes up to our mind as soon as we stop to reflect on the experience itself. And it would be a shame to lose it, of course. Also, consider that with this mentality, every day can be pretty much a learning experience, where you can learn even the smallest thing that can be useful the day right after. And it's also something that should be done regularly, because I guess all of you are thinking about retrospectives, that it's something that we all try to do when possible. And just like retrospectives, the habit of extracting information from past experiences is something that the more it's done within a team, the more it will be efficient, because the people will be way more relaxed and willing to do it over the long run. We can see some types of extraction on how to extract information, like, for example, just reflecting and applying, which is asking yourself what you have learned from an experience, like an ended project, and how you can apply all of that in a new project. Also, a very good one is pulling for feedback. For example, try after you complete a project, you could ask to your peers what you did well and what you didn't do so well and should avoid next time when you do a new piece of work. Another interesting strategy may be to demarcate moments, which is basically labeling learning moments to make them more tangible. Like, for example, if you have an interview with a candidate, you may try to label some moments within it to have way more clear in your mind some piece of knowledge that you want to learn and that you want to stick in your mind, and it will help you that information stick in your mind for way longer over your career. And another interesting type of extract is doing a pre-mortem, which is trying to do before starting a big project, assuming that it fails in an epic way, and try to work backwards to find out what caused it to fail and try to generate ideas to prevent it. Of course, it's a strategy that should not be overused because in general, we all know that projects are pretty much unpredictable and we cannot really predict every way they could succeed and neither every way they could fail. But if there's some way that you can already see as a big risk, this could be a useful strategy to find out new information way sooner and extract it. And some benefits that you probably already noticed, and we all know from retrospectives, are that basically this practice allows you to prevent repeating mistakes and prevent wasting work by repeating them in the future. And it also points out possible improvements that you could need, or some good actions, something good that you already did and should be repeated on your next project. Okay, that was pretty much it about the behavioral units. To conclude, I would say that as a reminder, these are considered by the authors of the book the starting point to become a great leader, but they also are actually effective in any collaborative environment where we have to do something creative and try to fix and solve problems. And all of these behavioral units can be combined to have the best effect. Like, for example, if you are having a tough discussion, you could both validate the point of view of another coworker, then use a playback to repeat the problem as you understood, and then to make sure that you understood it correctly and you are on the same page, and then you could try to Q-step, for example, to push them to find a better solution or to gather more details that you're missing. And one type of Q-step you could do is the link up, where you try to figure out what's the reasoning behind some of their proposed solutions. And I'll close with a challenge that you could do, especially if you get the book, which is way easier. And it's something we are doing with our book club with our client, which is trying to apply each behavioral unit individually 1 week at a time and try to see if it affects your productivity and how it can improve your work environment. And that's all. Thank you.